Dad laughed in my face. His voice cut through me like glass. You'll never step foot in our resorts. That moment burned into me, a scar I carried for years. But the night I finally stood on my own ground, I called security, canceled his VIP access, and watched as his keycard flashed red. That was the night the power shifted, and I realized blood doesn't always mean loyalty. I'm Virel, and this is the story of how being shut out of my own family's empire forced me to build one of my own. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you are here with me and listening to me. Comment hi below, or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if this story resonates, please subscribe to the channel. It means more than you know. It tells me I'm not shouting my pain into the void, but sharing it with people who care. I grew up in Palmetto Shores Resort, the aging beachfront property my family ran in Beaufort, South Carolina. My childhood was filled with the sound of rolling suitcases across the tiled floors, the tang of chlorine rising from the pool, and the salt-heavy air of the Atlantic drifting through every open window. Guests came and went like tides, and I was always there in the background, absorbing everything without being asked. My father Gideon believed the resort's heartbeat could only be passed down to one heir. He chose my older brother Finnick. I remember how Gideon used to walk the halls with Finnick at his side, his hand firm on my brother's shoulder, as he whispered lessons about occupancy rates, revenue per room, or how to charm high-paying guests. I would trail a few steps behind, desperate to catch a scrap of wisdom. If I asked a question, he'd dismiss me with a glance. "This is business talk, son. Go help your mother with the flowers." So while Finnick learned to listen to the pulse of a resort, I was handed a mop or told to adjust bouquets in the lobby. Even then, I found my own ways to learn. I remembered every detail about repeat guests, the man who preferred chamomile tea before bed, the family that always asked for extra towels, the businesswoman who needed a desk lamp brighter than the standard. I solved complaints when I could, sometimes smoothing over angry customers before they reached my father's office. But no matter how hard I tried, Gideon never once acknowledged that I had the instincts for this business. Dinners at our house, which sat on the top floor of the resort, became nightly performances of favoritism. Finnick would describe his future, how he'd study hospitality management, how he'd someday take Palmetto Shores to new heights. My father would beam, praising his vision and business sense. If I dared to share an idea, the air would shift. He would sip his whiskey, stare me down, and change the subject. My mother Diana tried to soften the silence by passing me another roll or touching my hand under the table, but she never contradicted him. One evening, after weeks of scribbling ideas into a notebook, I finally worked up the nerve to present them. I had sketched out a plan for a new reservation system, an online presence to attract younger travelers, and a loyalty program that could keep guests coming back. My hands shook as I laid out the charts on the dining table. When I finished, the room went still. For a heartbeat, I thought I had impressed him. Then Gideon's laugh exploded, sharp and dismissive. "Websites and cards. That's fluff, Virel. Resorts are about clean rooms and decent service, not gimmicks." His words cut deeper than I expected, but it was what came next that marked me. He leaned across the table, his eyes cold. "You will never step foot in our resorts. Not as an owner, not as a leader. That's Finnick's legacy, not yours." The silence afterward roared louder than the ocean outside. I excused myself, retreating to the window of my small upstairs room. Beyond the glass, the waves rose and broke under the moonlight, relentless, uncaring. My father's voice echoed inside me like a curse. From that night on, every ambition I carried was measured against those words. I stayed on, still working shifts at the front desk, but the weight of his rejection followed me everywhere. One night, while my father and Finnick entertained a wealthy couple with cocktails on the terrace, a storm knocked out the power across the property. Guests crowded the lobby, frustrated and restless. I scrambled, checking them in by flashlight, comping drinks, soothing tempers until the generators hummed back to life. By dawn, the crisis had passed. My father never mentioned my effort. Finnick bragged that he had kept the VIPs calm, though he had done nothing but sit at the bar with them. Days later, a letter arrived with my name printed in bold across the envelope. I slipped it open in the laundry room, heart pounding. Cornell University School of Hotel Administration. I had been accepted with a scholarship that covered most of the tuition. It felt like the first door ever opening for me. I hid the letter beneath my mattress. I didn't dare show my father, but my mother found it when she changed the sheets. That night in the kitchen, with only the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, she confronted me gently. "You've been accepted." I nodded, bracing for her disapproval. Instead, she sighed. "Don't waste your whole life chasing your father's nod, Virel. You'll never get it. Go find your own way." Her words steadied something in me. Still, the divide grew sharper. The night before Finnick left for his official send-off, complete with a party in the banquet hall, champagne toasts, and speeches about the family legacy, I packed a simple backpack in my room. I could hear the laughter and clinking glasses downstairs as I zipped it shut. When I stepped into the hallway, my mother waited, her eyes glossy with worry. She pressed a small envelope into my palm, bills folded neatly, the quiet savings she'd managed to hide from my father. "Don't let anyone tell you you don't belong anywhere," she whispered. I couldn't answer. If I had, I might have broken. At the station, the midnight train hissed in the dark. I climbed aboard, choosing a seat by the window. As the town lights blurred and the silhouette of Palmetto Shores faded into the distance, a mixture of relief and grief tightened in my chest. I was leaving behind the place that had shaped me both as a prison and as a promise. For the first time, I wasn't just the overlooked son of Gideon Kalin. I was a man with a ticket in his hand, heading toward a future no one in my family believed I could claim. The train carried me north through the shadows, and I pressed my forehead to the cold glass, whispering to myself the words my mother had given me. "Don't let anyone tell you you don't belong." Winter in Ithaca felt like a long, white sentence with no commas. At night, the snow swallowed the campus lights, and the cold turned every breath into a brief ghost. I worked the graveyard shift at the Thistle Cornell's teaching hotel, where the lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and wet wool, and the elevators chimed like patient metronomes. Here, no one knew I was Gideon Kalin's son. That anonymity was my first freedom. I stopped waiting for permission and started paying attention to the small, precise mechanics of care. One night, a middle-aged couple arrived past midnight, shivering and angry. Their reservation had disappeared from the system. The front desk trainee began to panic, flipping screens and calling a manager who didn't pick up. I asked the couple for 10 minutes, walked them to the fireplace with 2 mugs of peppermint tea, then slipped into the back office. There were patterns to mistakes and a language inside the software that revealed them if you listened. I found their booking misfiled under an in-house group code, released a blocked room, arranged a late checkout, and comped breakfast. When I returned with keys, their shoulders had lowered. The lobby felt warmer, though the fire hadn't changed. That was the first time Julian McRae really looked at me. He taught operations and ran the Thistle with a conductor's ear for tempo. He'd been everything from housekeeper to general manager in a Scandinavian boutique chain before academia. After the couple took the elevator, Julian stepped out from a column where he'd been watching. "You didn't raise your voice," he said. "You didn't blame the system. You moved the problem out of their hands and into yours. That's the job." Julian started lingering during my shifts. He'd lean against the marble and ask why I arranged the lobby seating the way I did, or what story the daily arrivals list told. He had a file cabinet memory and a gentle ruthlessness about standards. "Hotels aren't just business, Virel," he told me one snow-heavy dusk as we watched a bus of debate kids spill into the lobby. "They're organized mercy. People quit on themselves all the time out there. Our job is to remind them they still belong somewhere, even if it's just for a night." The words landed inside me like a pilot light. I said yes to everything he offered, shadowing housekeeping audits, learning linen par levels, analyzing revenue displacement for group bookings, running drills for a fire alarm at 3 in the morning. He taught me that a perfect check-in script without authentic attention was as useless as a chandelier with burned bulbs. He rewired my instincts, how to hear the difference between noise and signal, how to calculate value without turning humans into line items. I started to imagine a place of my own, a small hotel that used technology to amplify, not replace the human touch, a modern refuge that still felt like a home you didn't have to apologize for entering. Recognition came in small increments: an email from a guest, a note from a conference planner who said I'd made chaos feel choreographed, a slot on a student leadership team. For the first time, what I did and what I believed matched. That was when life tightened its knot. Julian missed a week of classes, then 2. The rumor settled before anyone said it out loud. He called me into his office on a wind-scraped afternoon, blinds half drawn against the white glare. "Stage 4, he said, not bothering with softer words. "I won't be here when you graduate." Silence took everything off the shelves between us. He motioned for me to sit. "You've been waiting your whole life for a key from a man who welded his door shut," he said. "Stop rattling it. Build your own door with your own lock and then decide who gets to enter." He smiled like he was granting permission I didn't need. "Promise me you won't ask small men for big approval. Promise me you'll make a place where people can come in from the weather." He faded fast. The memorial was in the ballroom, flowers on white linen, his favorite jazz record drifting through the chandeliers. Afterward, the department chair took me aside and handed me a thin envelope from Julian's estate. In it was a letter of recommendation written like a map of who I already was and who I could become, and a check for $50,000 life insurance he had quietly arranged. I stood outside with the letter in my coat, the fog rising off the gorge like breath from a giant animal, and understood that grief can be both anchor and engine. I clenched the paper until the corners bit my palm. This at last was a beginning no one could take away. I kept Julian's letter on my desk as I built spreadsheets that could hold both math and desire. 50,000 wasn't much in the language of real estate, but it was a lever. I spent weekends driving to towns with bones I liked, old streets, stubborn histories, roofs that wanted rescuing. In Asheville, North Carolina, a broker showed me Rose Hill House, a Victorian relic with a porch that sagged like a tired sigh and a roof patched with the wrong shingles. The banister was carved by someone who believed wood could sing. The hallways smelled of dust and old lavender. The windows held a sliver of the Blue Ridge like a promise. It was bankrupt. It was perfect. Every lender told me to look for a motel with drive-up rooms and low rehab costs. I heard them and bought Rose Hill anyway. Julian's money went first. The rest came from a small business loan and every dollar I'd saved working through school. I slept on a mattress in a room with no trim while crews tore out mold and ancient wiring. During the day, I learned to speak contractor. At night, I wrote the concept document until the language felt like a handshake, a place where software remembers your name, but a human remembers your story. A lobby that changes light with the hour. Local art that isn't just decor, but orientation. Technology as a backstage orchestra, hospitality as the melody. I inspected each room like a surgeon finger on the seam between old and new. We restored the heart pine floors instead of masking them. We kept the stair creak at the third step because it sounded like memory. I argued for custom lamps with warm cones of light because too many hotels forget that good reading is a kind of rest. I hired a tiny staff front desk housekeeping lead night auditor, a barista who could also plate small bites, and trained them myself. Hospitality is personal, I told them. Don't perform care. Offer it. Don't say policy when what you mean is, I'm not listening. I wrote guidelines, then told them when to break them. We opened as the Auden on a soft spring weekend with dogwoods blooming and a budget for marketing that barely existed. The newspapers didn't call. The travel magazine I admired passed. But guests found us. A photographer posted a sunrise shot of the lobby's arched window. A couple on a road trip filmed a room tour and called the bed dangerously comfortable. A novelist wrote a paragraph on her blog about the way the staff remembered her coffee order, and the barista asked about her deadline without prying. Bookings began to stack. Tuesday filled then, Thursday then the stubborn Sundays. By month 3 we were running full most weekends and respectable midweek, the kind of curve that tells you you've tuned the instrument right. I didn't tell my father. I sent a short note to my mother with a photograph of the restored staircase and a line about how the floors glowed at golden hour. She called once, whispered I was brave, and hung up when a door opened behind her. A week later the phone rang at dawn. Gideon's voice came through flat and hot. "You bought a ruin to embarrass me," he said. "Is that it? You opened this place to prove a point?" I stood at the lobby desk, hand on the old bell I'd polished myself. "I opened it to serve guests," I said. "I opened it because I know how." He breathed hard, like the line itself offended him. "You did this to humiliate me." Then the click. It felt like being disowned a second time, except this time I had keys in my pocket. 2 days later, a colleague sent me an article about a new oceanfront property in Charleston overseen by Finnick. The photos were glossy, and the lobby was a cathedral to borrowed ideas. The review, though, was unkind in precise ways: service inconsistent rooms, beautiful but impractical. A management team more focused on optics than experience. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just felt the old architecture of our family shift again, as if the house we'd all been trapped in had tilted another degree. Miranda Cho walked into the Auden on a rainy Thursday, wearing a navy coat and a mind you could hear working. She was an investor with a background in data and an instinct for pattern. She ordered a macchiato and a room for 1 night, then stayed 3. On her last morning, she asked for 10 minutes. "You're running occupancy like a chain without feeling like one," she said, pointing at the dashboard I kept open on a tablet. "You're using tech to make people more present, not less. That's rare. Have you thought about a second property?" I had spreadsheets for 5 cities and a list of buildings that made my chest lift when I saw them. I told her yes. That night I walked the halls as the rain clicked softly against the windows and tried to name the emotion in my chest. It wasn't victory. It wasn't even relief. It was a quieter thing, like a room finally at the right temperature. Still, my father's words lived in the corners like a draft you can't find. Guests slept. The night auditor hummed. The espresso machine cooled its metal breath. I locked the front door and looked out at the street, at the wet shine on the pavement, at the modest sign with our new name. The shadow of who I'd been fell away another inch. The man left standing was the one who had chosen his own door and installed his own lock, and tomorrow he would open it again. The night I got the call, Manhattan was loud and glittering below me, taxis sliding through the rain like yellow fish in a black river. I'd just come back from a hospitality conference where I'd been asked to speak me the kid who used to be told to refill ice buckets and stay out of the way. The moment was supposed to be triumphant, but the number flashing on my phone froze me in place. Mom. She didn't call often. Not without warning. Not like this. Her voice came in tight, as if she were holding her breath between every word. "It's Palmetto Shores," she said. "We're drowning." The resort I'd grown up in, where I'd polished railings and memorized the smell of ocean bleach, was now running below 40% occupancy. Finnick's gourmet restaurant had tanked, driving away local partnerships. Vendors hadn't been paid in weeks. The bank had started sniffing around for blood. "And your father?" I asked. She paused. "He's older. Stubborn. Keeps saying we don't need digital gimmicks. That this will pass. But Varel, it won't." Then she said it. The sentence that would tattoo itself in the back of my mind forever. "He'd rather let the resort die than let you save it." That night I sat alone in my apartment tower, staring out at the city grid. Neon signs blinked in slow pulses. People rushed beneath umbrellas, chasing trains and dreams. I remembered the sting of being 17 and hearing him say I'd never belong. I remembered folding napkins while Finnick got lectures on market share and supply chains. Part of me wanted to let them collapse, let the house of cards fall. They built it without me, why should I be the one to hold it up? But guilt is a strange tether. So is legacy. I called an old colleague who had once handled commercial lending portfolios. After a long silence, she said, "It's not just Palmetto Shores. Charleston's bleeding. Hilton Head has 4 liens on it. Florida Keys is under investigation for permitting violations." Her voice dropped. "They've leveraged everything. The entire chain is on the brink. One more missed payment and they'll lose them all." I didn't sleep. I walked until dawn, painted the Hudson pink and silver. Then I made a decision. If I stepped in, it wouldn't be as a son begging for recognition. It would be as a buyer. I formed a shell company, Mariner Equity, hired discreet legal counsel, and began acquiring the notes on each resort. It wasn't easy. Their pride was my camouflage. Gideon Kalin didn't believe in transparency. He believed in control. That belief let me maneuver beneath the radar, one silent move at a time. My goal wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Not just of property, but of every sliver of identity they told me wasn't mine to hold. I never told my mother. Not yet. Not until it was done. Because this time I wasn't asking permission. I was writing the deed. The sign outside no longer read Palmetto Shores. It now said the Tide and Thorn in brushed bronze letters that shimmered in the sun like wet sand. The old sea-weathered wood had been replaced with white stone and glass, but the scent of salt still clung to the wind and the waves still whispered against the Carolina shore. We hadn't erased its soul, we'd translated it. I walked the property before sunrise on opening day. Everything was ready. The open concept lobby caught the dawn just right, its floor-to-ceiling windows pouring gold across the reclaimed wood floors. A local jazz trio tuned up in the atrium. The team wore soft beige uniforms with sea glass pins. Guests were arriving already: investors, influencers, regional tourism directors. Reporters had been flown in. This wasn't just a reopening, this was a resurrection. And on the list of guest speakers, listed last with subtle flourish, was Varel Kalin, founder and principal designer. A courier had delivered an invitation to my family 3 weeks earlier. It bore no name but promised them seats of honor. They came. Of course they came. My father walked through the lobby as if nothing had changed. Finnick trailed behind, shaking hands, flashing the smile I remembered from every school awards night. Mom looked nervous, her eyes scanning for someone, maybe me. Neither of them recognized the staff. No one bowed to Gideon. No one asked for Finnick's opinion. They didn't notice the subtle changes: the RFID wristbands replacing room keys, the cloud-based concierge stations, the scent map I'd curated to shift through the day like tides. They just assumed, as always, that this was still theirs, until I took the stage. The room hushed. I adjusted the mic. "Welcome to the Tide and Thorn," I began. "This resort has weathered storms, seen generations come and go. Today marks not just a renovation, but a rebirth. And it's my deepest honor to stand here as the person who made that possible." I paused, then smiled. "My name is Varel Kalin. I am the owner of this property." There was an audible inhale across the ballroom. Cameras clicked. My father's jaw tensed. Finnick froze mid-drink. My mother pressed her fingers to her lips. Gideon's voice cut through the silence like a snapped cable. "You'll never step foot in our resorts," he snarled, echoing the sentence he'd once barked at a 17-year-old boy on a back porch. I stepped closer to the mic. Calm. Clear. "Then tonight, sir," I said, "your access ends." I turned toward security. "Please remove VIP access for Gideon and Finnick Kalin, effective immediately." A quiet gasp, then murmurs. Later that evening, after the last toast and the final round of applause, they tried to enter the executive lounge. Their keycards flashed red. They tried again. Still red. Finnick banged the desk, demanding a manager. Gideon barked at the receptionist, his voice carrying across the marble floors. I watched from the mezzanine above, leaning on the railing. The same man who once laughed in my face now looked small. Out of place. Denied. I descended slowly, joining them. "This hotel has new rules," I said. "Rules you don't get to write." Gideon's face flushed. "You think this makes you a man?" I didn't flinch. "No. But it makes me the owner. And you're now just a guest. Behave accordingly." Finnick stepped forward, waving a folder. "This isn't over," he hissed. "We'll sue. This is fraud." A woman in a tailored gray suit stepped from behind the front desk. "Our legal liaison." She opened the folder he'd handed over, flipped a few pages, then looked up. "All filings are valid. All transfers were legal. The resorts were acquired under lawful terms. You no longer hold ownership." They were silent. Just men with nowhere left to bark. The press didn't miss the scene. By morning, photos of the confrontation were circulating, spliced with side-by-sides of me as a boy behind the concierge desk, and me now in a tailored navy suit beneath the Tide and Thorn sign. The story had changed. I wasn't a Kalin afterthought. I was the Kalin who built something worth remembering. And from that day forward, when someone mentioned the Carolina coast, they didn't say Palmetto Shores. They said Varel Kalin's Tide and Thorn, and that was the only legacy I ever needed. The evening had just begun to fade into a quiet, ocean-laced dusk when the concierge handed me a note. A simple message, no signature: they'd like to speak with you. Privately. I knew who they were. The management team offered a few suggestions: lobby, meeting rooms, the boardroom, but I chose the presidential suite. The very top floor-to-ceiling windows that opened over the Atlantic like a confession. If this was going to be the final reckoning, it needed to happen in a place that echoed. I arrived early, stood by the glass, watched the waves churn under the violet sky. Then the door opened. My father walked in first, stiff-backed, his cane tapping like a metronome of pride. He didn't greet me, just went straight to the window and stared out, hands clasped behind him. Finnick followed, his tie already loosened like he owned the place. My mother came in last, quiet as ever, clutching her bag like a shield. No one sat. "You humiliated me," my father said without turning around. "That was your goal, wasn't it? You waited all these years just to make a scene." My jaw clenched. If saving this resort from your bankruptcy was a humiliation, then yes, I achieved it. He turned then. His face was red, but his eyes were cold. "You could have offered help. You could have come to me like a man. I did. Once. You laughed in my face." Finnick scoffed and slammed a palm against the dining table. "This whole takeover was a theft. You tricked us. You ran the numbers into the ground," I said, cutting him off. "You leveraged the properties against a vanity restaurant project you never finished. I paid off your debts. I stabilized every resort. You didn't get blindsided. You signed. All of you did." My father stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You may own the paperwork, but you'll never own the soul of this place." I looked at him, really looked. His skin was looser, his voice less steady, but the cruelty was still intact. That sentence wasn't about business. It was about control. "I don't need your soul," I said quietly. "I gave this resort a new one. One that breathes, not one that chokes." Silence. Then Finnick leaned in toward our father, muttering just loud enough for me to hear. "We should go public, flip the story, paint him as the betrayer." I stiffened. That wasn't pride talking, that was poison. "You want to destroy everything just because you lost?" I asked him. "You'd rather burn the family name to the ground than see me succeed." He said nothing. I turned to my mother. Her lips were trembling, her eyes caught between the men she loved and the man she'd watched grow without them. "I invited you here," I said, "because I hoped maybe we could begin again." My father laughed, bitter. "You think buying a few buildings gives you the right to lecture me?" "No," I said, "but it gives me the right to protect what I've built." I reached into my pocket, pulled out 2 RFID keycards and placed them gently on the table. "These aren't access passes anymore, they're just keepsakes. You no longer hold power here. You're guests. That's all." I walked out, leaving them in silence. The ocean kept roaring just beyond the glass. But inside that suite, the only thing that echoed was the end of something that never truly began. In the days after the confrontation, I made the hard choices. The family's VIP privileges were fully revoked. They were allowed to stay at the villa near the garden as a courtesy, but not a single executive access remained. Their names were removed from all internal databases. The press caught wind, of course. It became a spectacle. Disowned son becomes hotel tycoon, locks out family at grand reopening. And perhaps for a moment that's what it was. Finnick made good on his threat. He filed a civil suit accusing me of manipulation, fraud, and undue influence. But the court documents showed the truth, his signature on every contract, every loan default. The judge dismissed the case within 2 hearings. After that, he vanished. Someone told me he tried to open a seafood concept in the Florida Keys. It closed within months. By the next quarter, he was out of the industry. I didn't celebrate. I expanded. Seattle, Austin, San Francisco. We launched Indigo Wave Collection hotels, rooted in place but global in philosophy. We built with intention, staffed with care, and designed experiences that didn't just impress, but lingered in memory. Then one gray afternoon in late autumn, my mother showed up at my New York office. She didn't announce herself. My assistant found her in the lobby holding a small white envelope. "He wrote this," she said, pressing it into my hand. "He never sent it." I waited until she'd left. Then in the quiet of my office, I opened the letter. My father's handwriting was tight, controlled, familiar. "Varel," it began. He admitted to watching my progress, to reading the headlines, to staying silent when colleagues praised the Tide and Thorn over dinner. He wrote that he never imagined I could have done it without him, and that was his failure, not mine. You made something better than I ever could. You saw things I didn't. Maybe I taught you something in the negative what not to be. For that I owe you more than an apology. I owe you thanks. There was no date. I read it 3 times. Then I placed it in a drawer I never opened again. Weeks later I got the call. He had passed. Quietly. No final words. No final scene. I went home. For the funeral I wore the same navy suit I'd worn to the grand opening. I stood beside the casket not as a son begging for approval, but as a man who'd made peace with never receiving it. Palmetto Shores now. The tide and thorn looked different, but that afternoon it felt still. I walked the halls one more time, now fully mine, no longer haunted by the need to belong. Later that year, I founded the Diana Kalin Scholarship Fund, dedicated to students in hospitality who lacked family support. First-generation dreamers, the ones who folded linens and memorized guest names and hoped someone would notice. My final speech of the fiscal year wasn't to a boardroom or investor panel. It was at a small college in Pennsylvania. I ended with this: some doors are shut in your face, some fathers lock them tight. But if you learn anything from my story, let it be this: build your own door. Then give the key to someone else. That was my legacy, not revenge, not wealth, but the quiet satisfaction of becoming the man I was told I could never be, and making sure others wouldn't have to wait as long. I never set out to prove anything to the world. For years, I just wanted a seat at the table that bore my family's name. A seat I believed I had earned not through birthright, but through diligence, attention, and heart. I waited. I listened. I stayed silent in the rooms where I was told I didn't belong. And for a time I thought that if I worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, sacrificed long enough, that silence would be replaced with a nod, a hand on the shoulder, a simple, well done. But it never came. And when it finally did, in the form of a letter left unsent, I realized something even more powerful: my worth was never dependent on their acknowledgement. The value of my voice, my vision, my persistence, it didn't require a stamp of approval from anyone but myself. There are people like me everywhere, people who are told in subtle and brutal ways that they don't belong, that their ideas are too bold, their presence too inconvenient, their dreams too far-fetched. Sometimes the ones telling them that are strangers. Sometimes it's their own family. And that kind of rejection, when it comes from the people who are supposed to love you most, cuts deeper than we often admit. But it also does something else. It forces you to decide: will you shrink to fit the mold they've built for you, or will you risk everything to build a life on your own terms? I chose the latter. Not because I was fearless, but because I finally understood that the only way out of invisibility is through action. Through showing up even when they want you gone. Through speaking even when they don't listen. Through creating even when they call it foolish. This story began with a boy standing at the edge of a resort he loved, told by his father he would never belong. It ends with a man who not only owns that resort, but has transformed it into something more beautiful, more inclusive, more alive than his family ever imagined. But this isn't just about me. It's about all the young people out there waiting for someone to believe in them. It's about the student who cleans hotel bathrooms during the day and studies late at night. The daughter who wants to rebuild her community's motel into a place of warmth and pride. The son who has ideas his father refuses to understand. The dreamers whose families dismiss their ambition as fantasy. The quiet ones. The determined ones. I see you. And I built the Diana Kalin Scholarship Fund for you. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that no one succeeds alone. Behind every victory is a village, sometimes made of strangers, sometimes built from pain, but always formed through resilience. To the business owners, the educators, the alumni, the mentors, reading this, I ask you to look around. Who are you ignoring? Who is waiting quietly, hoping you'll notice them before they burn out? Whose dreams could you quietly fund, support, or simply believe in? To those still in the shadows, you don't need anyone's permission to shine. Don't wait for a seat at someone else's table. Build your own. Fill it with people who value authenticity over pedigree. who understand that empathy is not weakness but power, that legacy is not inheritance but intention, and when you build that table, leave some seats open for the ones coming behind you. Because one day someone will sit where you once stood, and they'll remember not the names of those who doubted them, but the names of those who handed them a key. Let us be those people. Let us pass the key. Let us build doors where none existed and open them wide.